Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I am absolutely thrilled to welcome you all here today. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy days. I am going to introduce my guest panel here in a few moments. So before I introduce myself, actually, I am going to introduce the panelists here, and then I'll go back and I'll introduce myself as well. And I'm not doing this in any particular order. I'm just going with the faces that have ended up on my screen and the order that GoToWebinar has put them in here. So we have Terry Burroughs with us here. Terry is the board chair at FHERO, Florida's Heartland Region of Opportunity. He is also a board commissioner at Okeechobee County District 4, and he is the president of the Chamber of Commerce at Okeechobee County. I've got Andrea Schrujier. She is with Valdosta-Lowndes. She is the executive director there, the County Industrial Authority. She is the former SVP of the Economic Development for the Albany-Doherty ED Commission and has served on the board of directors for the Georgia Economic Development Association since 2015. We have Rayna Teicheira with us as well. Rayna Teicheira, I've got it properly now, I think. She is the Economic Development Director for the City of Navasota in Texas and is also project manager for the Bush School of Government and Public Service at Texas A&M University. And last but not least, we have Dale Wheeldon. Dale is the president and CEO of the British Columbia Economic Development Association. And Dale has also served as the director of economic development for the city of Chilliwack in British Columbia. So welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
We are just delighted to have you all here. I love that we've got so many regions. We've got, Canada, we've got the US represented. I've got a few questions for you to start off the conversation, but before I do, I just want to say a few words about how we run our webinars here at GIS Planning. So my name is Alissa Sklar, and as the VP of Marketing for GIS Planning, one of the privileges of my job is to be able to work individually with all of our clients to help them with place marketing. And I love that because in doing so, I get to speak to clients of all different backgrounds, different sizes, from the states and the utilities to the counties and the smaller towns as well. When it comes to rural economic development, I have really learned so much over the years working with our clients. We always say we get our best ideas from our clients. Now, GIS Planning, as many of you will know, is the inventor and disruptor of GIS data for site selection or software that lives on your website. We are the fastest growing company for economic development software, and I think 67% of North Americans and 72% of Americans live in territories that we serve. Of course, we've been working with rural economic developers for all of the 25 years that we have been doing this, and it has really been a privilege for us to be able to do that. Now, when it comes to rural economic development, I know that it can really look very different from region to region. And sometimes people hear rural and they think agriculture, ag tech, others think forestry, mining, energy, tourism, a mix of those. And of course, rural areas have towns in them as well, or are in some kind of proximity to a larger metro area. What I'd love to do is maybe we could start off with each of you telling us a little bit about what your region looks like and what you think are some of the bigger issues that you're dealing with or are working on right now. And Terry, why don't we start with you, since you're the first one that I introduced here.
Okay, well, thank you, Alissa. Basically, we're located at about an hour and a half south of Orlando. I'm representing the Florida Heartland Region of Economic Opportunity, 6 counties, which includes Hardy County, Highlands, DeSoto, Glades, Okeechobee, Henry County, and the 4 cities of Immokalee, South Bay, Pahokee, and Belle Glade. And that's approximately a little over 350,000 people. Our composite of what we have here in terms of trades is agricultural business. We have tourism, obviously Lake Okeechobee being one of the largest lakes in the United States. And the focus of our community right now, or I would say our region, is trying to embrace the fact that we're bringing in light manufacturing, heavy manufacturing into this region, which really tries to start offsetting some of the, I'll say, deficits that we've had over the past year, depending on agricultural, tourism, and construction. We've had some fairly decent opportunities that have helped us transition to this. And I believe that these are as we continue to work toward each one of these regions, or each one of the counties work toward doing this, I believe that they're going to achieve the success that some of the others have already achieved right now. Obviously, we're closer. Some of us are closer. Some of my counties are closer to the East Coast than the West Coast, and some are closer to the West Coast versus the East Coast. But it gives us a pretty good variance in terms of trying to extract opportunities from both coasts relative to the light and heavy manufacturing.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit later on about that kind of regional aspect also, because I think you're doing some really interesting things by working together as a region. But I'll go through the different introductions, and maybe we can come back to that. Andrea, how would you be able to tell us a little bit about your area?
Sure, absolutely. So for individuals who are not familiar with where Valdosta-Lowndes County is located, we are halfway between Atlanta and Orlando, Florida, on I-75, and we have I-10 within close proximity to us. We are a countywide development authority, but we are part of a regional partnership through Locate South Georgia. Lowndes County itself is about 118,000 people in population, with Valdosta being the seat for the county at about 56,000 people. I would say we are definitely the regional hub for South Georgia in that we have a large healthcare system here through South Georgia Medical Center, Valdosta State University, Wiregrass Georgia Technical College, and several other different higher educational institutions located here. We have a base of great advanced manufacturing with some good announcements that we've had recently as it relates to GIS and Bimbo QSR and Supreme Boat. So I would say this about our economy here: it is very diverse. Anything from agriculture, forestry is huge here, to advanced manufacturing, boat manufacturing, life science, agrochemical, and then logistics distribution.
Okay, great, interesting. Thank you so much. Rayna, maybe you want to tell us a little bit about the City of Navasota, what's happening over there?
So the City of Navasota, we're a population of approximately 8,000 in Grimes County, and Grimes County as a total is around 26,000. We're located around an hour northwest of Houston, about 20 to 30 minutes southeast of Bryan College Station metro area, which that metro area kind of approximates around 270,000. So Navasota is pretty much a mixture of different industries, with our industrial park, heavy manufacturing, an oil and gas company, concrete and construction, and a recent announcement of manufactured housing with the Champion Homes project and business coming in. And then we're surrounded in Grimes County by lots of open agriculture. And then our city itself is probably considered a sparse suburban with the influx of housing that we're seeing come in. And we're really doing a big draw on tourism with our downtown redevelopment and revitalization projects.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And Dale, what can you tell us about? We've got an entire province here. Talk about diversity and lots of things going on, of course, across this huge territory. Tell us a little bit about BC and what you see.
Sure. So we're, British Columbia is, of course, the most West Coast province in Canada. Population's about 5 million, a little over 5 million, 5.2 million people. We only grew at about, I think it was about 1%, 1.5% last year. But our province is really broken up into sort of two distinct areas, if you will. So we have the larger centers like Vancouver. Most people have heard of Vancouver, Surrey. That part of the province is the largest percentage of the population. Probably about 65% of the population lives in that small area of the province. And it's really made up of the, sort of the heavier manufacturing, the technology, the clean industries, the larger healthcare centers, all of those types of things. And then when you have what really gets labeled as sort of rural British Columbia, outside of what we call the Fraser Valley, that area is all rural British Columbia, which again makes up about 80% of the land base of the province. And it's really diverse. You know, you do have, as you mentioned, Alissa, is we have the mining, we have the forestry, we have mining and forestry really makes up, and oil and gas makes up sort of the northern parts of the province. The interior of the province, you have some mining still, forestry as well as agriculture, primarily in the area of cattle ranching in some parts of the interior, and then in other parts of the interior you have more the fruit growing, the grapes, wineries. I happen to live in an area that has probably almost 200 wineries now. It's, you know, it's really made a huge change to the look of the economy in this part of the province, in the Okanagan. Tourism plays a big role throughout the province. It is critical to have. We've just managed to get cruise ships back this year. Not quite as many as we normally get to some of the coastal communities, which is nice to see. But yeah, we have it's a very diverse province, but every part of our province is experiencing challenges, I think, and we're going to hear this with I would suspect just everybody that's on the call today is in labor issues, workforce issues. We have, I don't think that we as economic developers or as communities, and even the general public in general, really understands the demographics and what happened over those 2 years. And it's not as simple to say that we have people that are not going to go back to work because they don't want to work. It's people that were at that retirement age. We have an aging population, and we didn't really account for that properly, I don't think.
Okay, so that I think is a really interesting segue there into labor issues, workforce in particular, for rural issues of rural areas of all kinds. I know that there is an issue both of retention of the folks who actually live in your areas to keep them there, but also workforce attraction. The pandemic changed this up maybe a little bit. Maybe there were folks in metro areas who decided they would rather be in places that weren't quite so densely populated. What does that look like in your different regions? And especially for those of you, I think, Andrea, Terry, Dale, certainly for all of you, you've got kind of larger territories that are very much a different kind of mix. I know Rayna, in the city, as you were saying, some sparse suburban, some agriculture as well. What does that look like? And what are some of the things that you have been doing in your area to attract and to retain the talent you have? And let anyone who wants to speak first, feel free to pipe up.
I'll start. I think for us particularly, we're very fortunate to have, again, a Valdosta State University as well as Wiregrass Georgia Technical College. So we're very fortunate to have those two higher education institutions located here in Valdosta-Lowndes County. But I also think part of that retention and attraction starts when they're a lot younger in your middle schools and your high schools. And something that our middle schools have done a really good job of is starting a STEM academy, starting that whole, why, asking all the different questions, but using our existing industries to get involved into the STEM academy. So several of the projects that these students work on are projects that our existing industries have had at some point or another in their manufacturing process. And those kids get hands-on experience on that process and how to solve it. So I think that gives them an introduction into advanced manufacturing and different fields that they probably wouldn't normally have thought of. And then we have a great program through our high schools, which is the work-based learning, and which is bringing back the apprenticeship programs, giving them the hands-on experience so that they know what they want to do. And what I would say is we've had some of our existing industries get involved in that. And while some of the children graduate and go to work directly at the existing industry, we also see them further their education as it relates to whether it's engineering, whatever that, or some other technical skill, but they'll further their 4-year education and then come back and work. So I think obviously there's lots of different approaches to it, but that's something we have found to work really well and make an impact in our community, in our existing industries and our new industries that have located here really enjoy those programs. So that's a couple of ways that we've done it. We also have Moody Air Force Base. So Moody usually ends up being one of the first stops you come through while you're in the Air Force, and we've found that we usually get requested again, which usually ends up being that when they're at retirement age. And that has helped feed our workforce and maintain a sustainable workforce for us too.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Some really interesting programs. What about the others?
You go ahead.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. To kind of piggyback off the school district participation, Navasota ISD recently completed a $60 million project for complete renovation of facilities, and also bringing in a lot of career and technical education programs in the high school that weren't offered beforehand. And so the school district's been very involved within the Navasota Industrial Park and our local industries to figure out kind of what some of their workforce needs are, so they can tailor some of those classes and programs to that future workforce need. And then we've also, just to try to get an idea of kind of what the issues caused by the pandemic and in the workforce, and kind of how we can leverage our community partnerships. We recently went through a Communities as a Startup program with Texas A&M Coastal Bend Innovation Center. And so we worked together with the Chamber of Commerce, the Council of Governments, Texas A&M team, and some of our local partnerships in Blinn Community College Career and Technical Center as well, to kind of see how we can all collaborate to address this issue and to address our labor needs. And so that's kind of spurred into the Grimes County Industrial Boot Camp that we're going to be hosting in late October. And so that'll be a 10-day program focusing on technical math skills, critical thinking, customer service, resume writing, and a variety of other skills. And then we're also working with the school district to launch a community job board. So working with our local industry and getting those opportunities in front of the students to kind of fill some of those needs.
Okay, lots of really interesting things going on there. Thank you. Terry, tell us what's happening in Florida.
Well, likewise, we have in our particular community, we have some very good state colleges that are located here. They're offering ranges of advanced technology, diesel mechanics, carpentry, things of that sort, air conditioning, I'll say auto mechanics. And one of the things that we've, some of our local industries or local businesses have started doing is having these particular programs where they can bring in high school children and I'll say children, young people, in order to, I'll say, let them see what really is out there. A lot of these young people don't really understand the industries that are even in their own community. So we created a youth leadership group. I run a leadership class throughout the chamber, which is an 8-month class. So we have taken that and just pulled it back and run it as a youth leadership. I'm not doing it, but the Economic Development Corporation is. But they take them out and they expose them to the various industries that are in our local communities. And they also have a project they have to complete based on the fact of what they see. They have to understand what benefit the project's going to have into their community, how are they going to fund it, and how are they going to create it. So it gives them a little bit of entrepreneurship at an early age. The high school, they have a number of projects that they're implementing throughout the region. And I think some of these are being helpful to maintain the employees, the children back, or the young people back in our community. When I first retired, I had really not retired, but I was on a year in between the time I was retired. But I had to still work in New Jersey, and I was flying back and forth into West Palm Beach. And every day I would leave my house in Okeechobee at 6 o'clock on Monday morning to catch a flight, or 5 o'clock. and there would be lines of cars going towards the coast. When I come home on Thursday, those cars would be coming back. But what that demonstrated to me, there was just a transition of people going to the coast to work because there were no jobs here or good paying jobs. And one of the things that we found out is that we started working on trying to eliminate that by this with the economic development organizations that we have. And we ran into, and recently we've ran into this, and this is affordable workforce housing. Our workforce is one thing, but making sure that we have affordable workforce housing in these communities is essential, because you can do everything that you would love to do in your community. You can bring in businesses, you can bring in all of the things that are associated with the businesses, which are a multiplicity of what we call flow of the money. But if you don't have housing, you're dead in the water. And that's what we're finding out right now. It's got to be affordable workforce housing. And we're trying to figure out exactly what we need to do in order to solve that problem.
Okay, great. Really good point. Thank you. Dale, what would you say about this?
Well, so it's interesting. It's a whole interesting discussion, and I'm a little over 30 years old, and I've been in the business for maybe 30 some odd years, doing economic development in rural communities and a larger center outside of Vancouver, and then running this association for the last 14 years. We have seen such a transition from what we used to typically do as economic developers when I first started off in this industry, and to think about talking, as Terry was just talking about, workforce and housing. And here we're talking about workforce, housing, and medical. And these things that the economic developers are having to get involved in now versus what we used to get involved in are so different. And we're seeing that throughout British Columbia. Our economic developers are working on issues related to workforce, be it similar, Rayna, to like a website linking the employers, employees, and not only we're partnering actually with a company right now through the association to bring a workforce page to a couple of disaster impacted communities that we work with, that we've been working with for the last just about a year now. And that is bringing together the colleges, the local colleges, the universities, the employers, the Work BC, the workforce agencies, local businesses, local government, everybody together to sort of talk about the jobs and the skills that are needed in the community. I really liked what you talked about, Rayna, about the teams that the collaboration that you had in putting together your plan and your programs, because I don't think we can do it in isolation. I don't think economic developers have the only knowledge or skill to be able to put together these types of programs, and we need to do it in collaboration with our other community partners. And I think we're starting to see more and more of that happening throughout the province. But there's, we still talk about the challenges around housing. Vancouver is one of the most expensive places in the world to buy a house. It is one of the most expensive. It's definitely, amongst the most expensive in Canada. And we can't, our minimum wages have been raised and everything else, but that still doesn't get you to the point of being able to afford a house. And so how are we going to address that issue? And we've seen tremendous movement in our real estate over the last year and a half, including myself. I moved from Chilliwack into the Okanagan, into a cheaper area to buy. The real estate here was, basically I got a smaller place, but it was a third of the price. And but that still doesn't mean that somebody else can afford that that's working in the tourism industry that our communities work on. So we need to find solutions for that, and we're not going to do it in isolation or sitting in our offices doing it by ourselves. We need to bring other people together, including our Indigenous communities, downtown merchants, everybody to find solutions to this, or we just continue to have problems.
So I'm interested what you've all talked to some extent about collaboration at all levels, both with the technical schools, the high schools, with the industry, the business parks, the entrepreneurs, state colleges, chambers, elected officials, city councils. I think that's fantastic. Who is leading that? I mean, is this something that you feel comes from economic development? Who kind of initiates things? And you all talked about different kinds of programs. So I'm wondering, as part of the EDCs that you're at, or the associations or the chamber that you're at, is that something that you feel it's now part of the work of economic development to take the lead on some of these collaborations?
Yeah, go ahead, Terry. Yeah.
I'll speak from the Florida Heartland. I have 6 counties and 4 cities. One of the counties has an EDO, or Economic Development Organization, and I look to them to lead those efforts in their respective counties, because each county has its own different demographic, own different types of needs. And so I look for them to be the leader of that, but also in the fact when they bring it back to our, our bi-monthly meetings, to see what type of collaboration that the other economic development organizations within the region can help them with. For example, we may have a opportunity coming from a site selector that would maybe not retrofit into one of the counties, but that county would call over and say, listen, I have this one, here's the site selector, talk to them. So we try to share things in order for that collaboration to really tie itself together, not only from the colleges and everybody else, but when we're working on these new opportunities, we bring everybody in, and that's the responsibility of that EDO in order to do that.
Okay, I like that. Okay, that makes sense. Dale, you also had a thought about that?
Well, yeah, I'm a firm believer and always have been in sort of that regional partnerships. It doesn't have to be, we have a tendency to sometimes say it's regional economic development, and Terry, I 100% agree. You can live 20 miles away, we think kilometers up here, but I remember to say miles. The 20 miles away from one community, and their economy will be completely different. Their needs are completely different. Their, the skill levels and the demographic makeups of that community. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be working regionally. We all have, the assets in one community will be the assets for another community. Not, it's that hospital. We can't have a hospital. At least we don't here. We don't have a hospital in every single community in our province. We, or one that can afford to open, put it that way, or have doctors to open them. It's, so we need to work with each other and share with each other. But I'm starting to see more and more collaboration happening, and the recognition that just because we do have differences in our needs, there are still commonalities of maybe one aspect of that need that we can work together on to pull off, whether it be in physician recruitment or some type of skill work or investment attraction. I love it when I hear a community saying, hey, I couldn't make this one work, but I know that down the road, this community has the land or this community has the workforce, and they send that business to that community. There's nothing better than that. That's how we always operated in the past, and that's the way it should operate. We don't want to lose investments in our province, and we all benefit from it. So anyways, that's my 2 bits. I think partnerships are really critical. Yeah.
I think for us, it's part of our existing industry program through the economic development arm here in Valdosta-Lowndes County. So if we're constantly going out and meeting with our existing industries and we're hearing those concerns as it relates to workforce, or we're hearing about their workforce needs, then naturally you become the spokesperson to your partners within the community. So we have what's called your Business Retention Action Team, and that's made up of our school systems, our higher education institutions, our Chamber of Commerce, and other business leaders. The Georgia Department of Economic Development is part of that. And so we come around the table, report those issues, or we kind of say, hey, these are some common themes that we're seeing in our communities. How can we help? What is it that we can do? And out of that, we've had some of these collaborations, which one of those is the Wired for Workforce, where we partner with our high schools, our technical college. We fund the program, and they bring in students that maybe they're that low to moderate income that weren't really, they're not going to a 4-year college, but they do want some type of skill. So that's some of the things that come out of those conversations. But I do think as economic developers in our communities, it's up for us to provide an avenue for that communication to take place.
Okay. Okay. So to be that kind of communication conduit or to facilitate and do those combinations.
And then on our end of things, we have a really good relationship with the Brazos Valley County of Governments. They're a 7-county organization and Grimes County falls within that. So they've done an incredible job of bringing us all together and kind of facilitating some of these meetings to where we can kind of understand what's going on around the region, and then bringing us opportunities like the Communities as a Startup program that I had mentioned. That was an opportunity that was brought forth by the Council of Governments and got specifically Grimes County and Navasota together, and a lot of our key organizations within the community, with the school district representation, the county, Texas Department of Transportation, Workforce Solutions, and also we have a really good relationship with our Chamber of Commerce. And within the last year, we, on the city's end, we started facilitating these monthly meetings with the Chamber of Commerce, the Navasota Independent School District, and the county, just to all get on the same page of some of the growth and projects we see coming our way. That way the county can start to prepare, in the school district, for whether it need to be expansion. They're kind of forward thinking of next 5-10 years of planning, just so we're keeping them aware of what we hear and what we know is coming on our end, and then also vice versa to see kind of what projects those other organizations are working on, to see how the city can prepare in turn.
Sorry, I was muted there for a second. I guess, Rayna and Andrea, I'm thinking in particular you have rural regions, but you're also somewhat close, quite close proximity to very large metro areas or urban centers. How does that work out, both in terms of the housing issue that we were talking about, that kind of affordability, but also in terms of collaboration? I mean, sometimes these larger areas are kind of a force unto themselves, and they don't always think about the surrounding regions. Are you seeing collaboration or openness from them to that kind of collaboration?
I'll let Rayna go.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, with the Brazos Valley Council of Governments, we also partner with the Brazos Valley Economic Development Group, and so just to kind of, they keep us aware of what's going on, and we keep them aware, just with us being around 20 to 30 minutes away from Bryan College Station, and as that metro area is rapidly growing, we're seeing some of that impact of with us population growth, and housing is an issue, as we all kind of can understand that. And so one thing that we've done is recently conducted a housing study and a housing survey for all of our local workforce, and moving forward, kind of working with the Brazos Valley EDC and Brazos Valley Council of Governments, just to kind of see how we can address that moving forward. But yeah, there's lots of collaboration amongst our smaller community with our regional partners in the metro area.
Okay, good to hear.
And I would say the same thing. It's just collaborating with a lot of our surrounding communities, counties that in our 9-county, we have what's called a joint development authority. And in those 9 counties, understanding what's taking place in their areas, talking with their cities, talking with their counties, understanding where their housing gaps are. But we do tend to be that central location. And so we've definitely had a shortage of housing over the last couple of years, but we are seeing that being built now, especially from a workforce housing as well.
We've had a question come in about for workforce migration. Like, how much has that been a factor for you? Are you using migration as an option to grow workforce? And if so, what are the kind of selling features? What are the methods you're using to attract new people, if that is a deliberate strategy? Open this to anyone.
Well, I don't believe from our standpoint and from our regional aspect, trying to use a mitigation strategy of that. I mean, obviously people from the coast and we've seen this already, it just happened, is that people have gotten tired of traffic, expensive property, housing expenses, so they like this nice country style of living. Now, we have to stop there, because what happens when they move here, the same problems start happening into these rural counties that we currently have over on the coastal counties. So what we have tried to do, and what we're working on diligently for each one of the counties, is making sure that we are planning our communities appropriately. Because if we do not plan the community appropriately, we will have the same problems and have the same effect as what we have on our coastal areas right at the present time, where there's congestion and things of that sort. And so it's a challenge for us for the rural counties, because rural counties notoriously have just kind of rocked along and didn't have too much to worry about. But in this particular environment and the way things have happened after the pandemic, we're seeing a whole different thought process, and people are wanting to move out into our rural counties, and they would like to be there because the type of lifestyle we have. But with that, we have to manage we have to manage our planning organizations appropriately, so that we don't have the same problems.
Yeah, okay, some really good points. So you're going about it kind of strategically and thoughtfully, rather than just, just thinking all growth is good, notwithstanding. What about Dale? What would you say about that in terms of migration? I know, especially in the northern communities in some parts of the interior, that certainly can be an issue.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things, number of communities over the last few years, as you probably know, Alissa, we're really faced with the downturn in the forest industry, and it created sort of an abundance of what thought would be an abundance of inventory of housing. With the pandemic, some of those communities were looking at their diversification opportunities, and a couple of them, 100 Mile House in particular is one. Clinton, BC is one which didn't really plan it this way, but it was part of their strategy, but they hadn't really acted on it, is that whole remote worker aspect. And what's happened in a few of these communities that have, we're really trying to target those remote workers. They work towards better broadband. They work towards, better subdivisions and newer housing, and put in development incentives to encourage new housing, not industrial businesses, but new housing. Is a lot of these people from the larger centers, as they were required to no longer work in their office, have relocated. And when they relocated to these smaller communities, I mean, we're seeing really nice growth in areas like 100 Mile House, or like I say, this Clinton, where a remote worker will come in, and in them they bring their spouse, or they'll bring family. And when they do that, if the spouse is not connected to the workforce in sort of an environment where she couldn't move from, and she was able, or he was able to relocate. This one in Clinton was I think he was a planner, and she was I think a legal assistant or something, and they came to the community, and she said, I don't want to do that anymore. There was no lawyers in the community, so that I think she could work with, but she opened her own business. So she became an entrepreneur in the community. So, that in itself has created change in that community. They now had a flower shop that they never had a flower shop before. And I know it sounds minor, but when you're in rural communities, the community of Clinton, for an example, is 300 people. The community of 100 Mile House, a bit bigger than that, but it's bringing in people to work in other types of workforce and increasing. Those people are having a tendency to shop more in the communities than even some of the previous residents, because they've driven an hour and a half to work every day or whatever. They don't want to do that, so they're spending money in the communities, and I think it's starting to revitalize the economy of those communities, to where even though they brought in more people and more labor force, they need more, because the economy is stronger than what they thought it would be with the loss of the primary industries. So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And you mentioned these kind of post-pandemic, these people who are happier with the quality of life. a lot of that puts pressure on having this broadband accessibility. If you're going to be living outside a metro area, but you still want to be able to zoom into the office and participate in those meetings, how much is that an issue in the different regions that you're all serving? Demand for just excellent quality broadband, is that something you've got? Is it something you're concerned about? Is it something you're building towards?
I would,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Yep.
no, I was gonna say, you know, in the city of Valdosta, the metro, we had good broadband. It wasn't that there was a lack, it was available, but where we found definitely through COVID, it was in our rural parts of the county. So when all this, you know, schools went online and you had a lot of students that didn't have access to it. So, I mean, I think that was prevalent throughout the state of Georgia. So Governor Kemp awarded grants to different communities, and Lowndes County received $22.5 million to install additional broadband into those rural parts of the county, which will give us about 18,000 more people access to internet. So I do think it is, you know, part of the, you know, it's just like the telephone. When we came out with the telephone, all of a sudden that just became part of your infrastructure, and broadband is the same today as electricity and water. So I'm thankful for our governor's foresight into doing that and helping some of these communities install it. And then there's also just the partnerships that we have with those broadband companies, fiber companies, to install and partner with the municipalities and governments to help do that too. So it's definitely been an issue. We're fortunate that not so much within the city, but definitely in the county. But it's
right. Okay.
Creative ways to solve it.
I know I spent 5 months on the National Association of Counties Broadband Task Force, and we created a process of how to start going about putting rural broadband in. And I think one thing that Andrea touched on is that broadband has become, especially for economic development, as essential as electric, water, sewer, all of those components that we used to pay attention to. But it also becomes very important for not only from the children who need to have access from home for their homework, but telemedicine is another aspect of it. I sit as a chairman of trustees for the hospital, and telemedicine is a huge opportunity for some of these rural counties that do not have, I'll say, doctors available to them. But in the state of Florida, I will say personally, due to the fact I spent 32 odd years in a telecommunication business, I think that personally we're a little behind on getting our broadband programs established, and we're working diligently with the state. The unserved and underserved areas in our communities they have been devastated with the pandemic, and it has not gotten any better. I mean, we've tried to do different things with the monies that we got from the American Rescue Plan, the CARES money, and some of it has been out into the community so that we give hotspots to the young people so they can come in and get their homework done. But eventually we'll get everything that we need, but it's going to take some time because we have not really taken the energy behind putting broadband in rural communities. And now we're seeing that that's a huge gap, because not only do you need it for the young people, but you also need it for economic development.
Absolutely. And also as a workforce thing, you know, it's one of the things that people are looking at as they're deciding where to live or where to move some of the time. So
that's the thing. If you know, that we as the economic developers and where we've seen communities overcome some of these the broadband challenges is those ones that are actively lobbying, and the politicians and the local governments are working together to do this. If they're working in regional collaboration, every single election cycle, it's the same thing. With federal or provincial elections, is we're going to increase broadband. It becomes an issue. Or it becomes a topic of discussion. We're going to do this, and everybody gets elected based on, you know, one of those. You know, they all say the same thing, and then, you know, 4 years later or 2 years later or whatever it is, you're saying the same thing all over again, and they're pumping lots of money into it but it doesn't seem to reach those communities. And then we run into a pandemic, and you can't educate your kids because you don't have broadband. We've got Indigenous communities throughout this province that just don't have the broadband services. And how does the education system work for them when you shut down, the schools and you can't educate your youth? And so that's been a challenge. And I think that's really been brought to a head. The telehealth, one of the, I'm on a list in my community right now. We talk about, a healthcare system. I'm on a list in our community right now. I'm in a community of about 35,000 people. I'm on a 5-year waiting list for a doctor. And so for me, and as you know, my health issues, it's like, but I can't personally get a doctor. And so I have to, the only way for me to see a doctor is to phone to a walk-in clinic a week or 2 weeks in advance to try to get in. That's not a walk-in clinic anymore. All of a sudden you're setting up an appointment and there's no guarantee as to which doctor you're going to see, or it's going to a hospital. Whereas I can pick up the phone now or through a broadband connection, see my doctor face to face by connecting with TELUS Health, or there's a couple of other health companies that are trying to do this. But of course, does it go against our Health Act? So that's going to be challenged. And so it's, there's so many of these things, but for our rural communities, if they don't have broadband or any community, and it's going right by their front door, but there's no requirement to run these wires into, or the fiber or whatever it is, into the buildings or houses in a given community, because it's going from point A to point B, not point A and we'll swing off here and swing off here until we get to B. It's going in a straight line from one big center to another big center. And we need to figure out a way to make sure that those spurs are created.
Are included. As Andrea said, I think before, that it's really, we have to see it as just like a necessity now. It's like electrification or telephone. The pandemic has taught us that broadband is no longer a luxury. It's not just for watching Netflix, so that people need to be able, especially in rural or more remote communities, and certainly for economic development. It's hard to imagine how we would do it without those things. Can anyone share some stories or stories of kind of recent economic development successes? If this could be, I'll let you define success your own way. It could look like a workforce achievement or some new program. It could look like an investment from outside, a retention issue, something that you think is just kind of a relevant to the issue of how rural areas can do economic development.
Well, I can start in Henry County, which is one of my counties to the south, on the south end of the lake. They have a airport where they're going to start taking off some of the flights coming into Miami International for products. So that in itself has created a whole different concept of number of jobs, and it's almost like it's created this cascading type of process that one job led to creating 2 or 3 other types of opportunities. And so when they start taking off, a lot of the I'll say the airlines coming in with flowers and products that are coming in from either South America, Central America, whatever it may be, and start distributing them, you can start seeing what that's going to do to that south end of the lake. And then it transitions up 30 miles north of to where I am. And so that's a very good opportunity that my economic development people have been working on.
I like that. Okay, so that one thing, of course, that has like a wider impact. That's great. What about the rest of you? Any kind of recent successes that kind of help illustrate how rural economic development can work?
So one of the projects that I had mentioned earlier with the Champion Home Builders new business coming in, that's a recent success story in our opinion that we're very excited about. So it was around a 270,000 square foot facility that was recently occupied in our industrial park, and we had some conversations with them late last year about how to get their their first line up and running, and what we could do to kind of help them to get their second line, because it would bring in around 100 or 250 new jobs to our local economy. So kind of leveraging our partnerships, the City Economic Development Corporation and Chamber of Commerce got together to kind of see what different tools we can use to help get that project going. So we were able to utilize state incentives through the Texas Enterprise Zone program, and also Chapter 381 agreements to help with that, and also with our industrial park agreements to be able to provide utilities to this business to help with their operations. So we've been seeing some great success with that, and as of April of this year, they're already over 100 employees, and so hopefully by next year, they're anticipating around 250.
That is a great success. And I love the way you're talking about collaboration, everyone putting their heads together to study like how to make this work, you know, and how the different partners can be part of that. So thank you for sharing that. What about you, Andrea?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate to be part of a group called Locate South Georgia, which is a 21 county collaboration. And then we have Valdosta-Lowndes County. I would say probably about 10 years ago, we didn't see a ton of economic development projects, but I would say in the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of activity in rural Georgia, or in at least South Georgia here, anywhere from Bainbridge, who had Danimer Scientific, Taurus headquarters locate, to Thomasville, who had Checkmate, which is another gun manufacturing company, locate there, Ashley Home Furniture locate, and then over to Valdosta, where we recently just announced GAF, a roofing materials manufacturer, and international roofing materials manufacturer locate, with 136 jobs and about 150 million in capital investment. And then we started focusing on food processing because we do have a lot of ag in our region. And so we have Beanbo QSR, who located in our region as well, with about 75 jobs and $50 million in capital investment. And then also a glass manufacturing company that located here with 200 jobs, and they're growing. So we've seen some success in the last several years, which we didn't used to see for, you know, a while ago. So we're happy to see all that. And so I'm happy to see people looking in South Georgia.
Well, those are some really great examples. I'm glad to hear about all those things. And I know that in the state of Georgia, there has been a lot of work and collaboration at the state level to facilitate this for rural Georgia. So I know the state Georgia Economic Development Corporation, Electric Cities, Georgia EMC, Georgia Power have been working with Resimplify on a single property database, and I know that's something that we've worked with as well to provide, you know, a fully featured Zoom prospector tool that they can use so that they can get these listings to smaller rural communities with special pricing, so that we can help ensure that. And I love to see that at the state level, all of these different organizations came together and thought about how do we get as much of rural Georgia represented as possible. And so it's that's been a really good program to see. Thank you for sharing that. Dale, do you have any examples or of successes? I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe at different levels, I could talk about sort of some larger types of investment that have happened more in the sort of larger centers. We're seeing a number of different things in some of the rural communities where, you know, we can talk about the pandemic, you know, being a bad thing, or we can talk about the pandemic being sort of a change maker in the sense of how we do things in our communities and how we connect with our own businesses. And I think one of the things that's excited me the most about sort of the pandemic is sort of one of my passions is business retention expansion. I like teaching it, I like doing it, I like talking it, because I do think success starts at home. And if we're, one of the things that I really have seen our businesses do, thanks to the incredible support of our government, thanks to the incredible support of sort of some trusts that we've got throughout the province, sort of working with different regions, is focus has been put into going and meeting face to face or through virtual business walks, or and having more interaction with our businesses where they're realizing that local governments are literally changing policies bylaws, permitting regulations, because they didn't understand at how this was limiting growth, or how this was limiting the addition of new businesses. And until we address those, our ability to attract businesses to these rural communities is a huge challenge. So I think that I seen that, and that really excited me. And there's another community. One of the communities was that you know of because of your generous support of GIS to support one of the communities that were impacted by the disaster last November, when we had massive flooding that literally isolated the southern part of the province from the interior. So basically the 80% of the province was isolated from the supply chain. We had no supply chain access, and our businesses were closed because they couldn't get supplies. And there was one community that was really impacted with the water that came in, and it was a small community of about 3,000 people. And GIS allowed us to get a mapping of these businesses as they were opening, and we were able to use that to market those businesses that were opening. And it was kind of, I think, a creative use of your program. And in that community, they were primarily a forestry-based community. And prior to the flood, they'd been successful in attracting two things. They've been really successful in attracting a marijuana company to where, as you know, marijuana is legal up here. So they built this huge, almost I think it's 100,000 square foot facility to grow marijuana, and it was working so well in the community, and so the community was changing, and there was new tax base coming in, new tax revenues. They redid their entry points to the community. They redid, signage in the downtown core, and then of course the water came in, and it sort of changed everything. But now it's refocusing them to look at what can we be now, and we went in, we did a plan with the community, and sort of there's some real focus in the community, more energy in the community to sort of look at those new things, the new directions that they can go. And the company that was doing the marijuana just started doing R&D research on mushroom. Unfortunately, it's the magic mushroom, the ones that unfortunately I'm not, I guess you can all have your own opinions, and including mine. But it's creating more jobs and an R&D industry that never existed in this community. And it was a commitment of their mayor and their council and their one-person economic development office, because literally it's even hard for them to work regionally in this community, that's led to this success. And you go into that downtown and you just see prosperity. You see people working together, collaboration, and I think it's just a really good sign of, we can sit back and whine and complain, or we can sit back and do. And this is a community that did, and I take my hat off to them. So.
Well, that's a great, I guess, summary of what economic developers do. I mean, that's really what we're hearing from everyone, is these kinds of things, and also from all of you about that kind of trickle down, or the reverberations of each one of these successes and how it has these kind of other impacts on these communities as a whole. I like the idea of looking at the silver linings, whether it's a pandemic or the disasters that communities. So as an opportunity to be thoughtful, as you said earlier, Terry, about growth. It's not growth at any cost, but to be aware of what does it mean to grow, and how do we maintain characters, especially of rural areas, if that's the quality of life, that has always been meaningful to the people there. We've come up to the end of our time here, but I'd love to give all of you a last word here. If there's something that you think is a single issue or something going forward in your community that you'd like to see people in rural areas be more thoughtful about, or focus on, or celebrate, then I will leave it all to each one of you to let us know, what does it mean to be part of rural economic development? What would you like people to take from this?
It's a team sport, and it takes everybody to do it. It's just not something that each one of us can do by ourselves, but it's definitely a team sport. And I think that's been a theme throughout the conversation is collaboration, and then also leadership. And it's, you know, having those leaders in place in your community that are willing to work together, and economic development is the fruits of those labors. So just congratulations to all of you for just being, you know, steadfast in economic development. It is not for the faint of heart.
No, you're right, and improving the community for sure.
Yeah, I agree too. That I think just kind of we see very similar themes, even though we're in different parts of the country, parts of the world. So I mean, it's trends that we're all seeing, but I mean, it's great to learn from all of y'all and other communities, just to see kind of what works and how we can all partner together, because we all have the same goals.
I like that. Okay, thank you.
I'm like Andrea. I think some of my challenges is the educating the political field what economic development is, because they can change the dynamics of economic development with one vote. And the commissioners in our areas, they're doing real well at trying to understand the dynamics of economic development. But we also have to make sure our legislators know that what that really means to our communities, and how to help those communities.
Okay, yeah, that's good change maker point.
I think that's a real valid comment. Is the local leaders? We're going through municipal elections right now here and we can talk federal, we can talk provincial, or in your case, state. But if we don't have the local leaders educated on what economic development realistically is, and what you can, and in some cases what you can't do, and you know, I can remember a small community of, you know, a couple thousand people saying in their economic development strategy said they're going to attract IKEA. You know, they're not going to attract IKEA. So I went there and I said to them, and we do local leaders training workshops, and I said, you know, let's look at this strategy and go, what can you realistically accomplish? And you're not going to attract IKEA. And we explained why you're not going to attract IKEA. And we have two IKEAs in the province, both in, you know, cities of, you know, 1 million people, and you know, 2,000 people is not attracting an IKEA, and so, or go after, who was it? Was it Apple or somebody was relocating or put out a proposal, looking for proposals. I mean, they wanted to attract those companies, and it's just not happening. Or I think it was Amazon's head office or something like that. And, you know, 50,000 people needed, you know, it's not moving to a community of 2,000. So, you know, it's to get that understanding. I think the biggest thing that rural communities need to do, I do think educating our local leaders is important, and we'll be starting that again after our municipal elections. We hope to be traveling the province. We're actually doing a session this week for local leaders that are running for office to better understand economic development. But I think rural communities, to be successful, is just be creative. Don't think the same old, same old. Don't wake up today and think, I'm going to do what I did yesterday. Wake up today and say, today's the day I'm going to change the world. Today's the day I'm going to change my community, and work towards the change. You will have resistance. You still can work towards positive change in your communities. So we just can't do the same old, same old.
Yeah. That's an inspiring way to end, I think. I agree with you on that. And hopefully we can re-energize and keep our leadership as they change committed to the things that are important to us that we see in our communities. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to share your expertise and your practice and your perspectives today. This was really interesting and insightful for me, and I really appreciate all of your time. I want to thank all of our attendees for taking time out of their days as well. As I said, you will hear from us by tomorrow with a link to the video and contact information for all of our panelists who gave so generously of their time today. Be well, thank you all, and have a wonderful day. Take care.
Bye, everybody. Thanks. Have a great day.
Thank you.